incredible scene. It was 4th of July. And of course, that's not a holiday there. So we were working and we were shooting an opera scene. The camera was behind the stage, over the singers and dancers, seeing the whole theater full of audience, So we had like 500 extras there. And so I said, roll it, playback. And suddenly, instead of Mozart's music, American national anthem starts to play.
And out of the flies came this huge American flag and unrolled, unfurled on the stage. And 600 Czechs stood up and sang the national anthem of the United States and knew the words.
I get goose pimples when I think about it. All the extras stood up and either sang or hummed the Star-Spangled Banner with us.
All stood up except 30 men and women standing, panic on their face, looking at each other what they should do. That were the secret police, dispersed among the extras,
And I was sitting there thinking, good God, the Army's going to come and we're all going to go to jail. Because this is an act of rebellion.
It started when we crossed the border. We just were in customs and they said, okay, you can go on. Milos said to me, you're now in Czechoslovakia, forget logic.
Only in a taxi I learned that we are going to see a play about a composer. And I thought I'm going to faint,
Milos made a great fuss and said, oh no, I hate biographies of musicians and that kind of thing. I loathe it. No, I'm not coming.
I saw so many, in communist countries, they love to make movies about composers because composers don't talk. They make music, they don't say anything subversive. And they were the most boring films I ever saw. So I was prepared for a painful evening. The curtain went up and there is this wonderful drama. I couldn't believe my eyes.
I was introduced to Milos in the interval.
Peter was very nervous. I met him for the first time that night.
And he said to me, with the marvelous directness that characterizes him, if the second act is as good as the first, I will make a movie of it.
I called Mr. Zanz, only to find out that he already had the name of the play on his list, what to see. And that's how it all started.
I thought it was a great play. The play really worked for me. He said, well, what about a picture? I said, it's not a picture. I don't think it's a picture. I said, there's not enough about Mozart for me. And then Milos hit me on the arm. I still have the bruises, even though that was 20 years ago. He said, that's right. It needs music, Mozart, and music.
And Milos invited me up for the weekend to his house in Connecticut. And he was just as forthright then. We spent an extraordinary weekend in which he said to me, you realize that everything will be different.
In a theater, everything is stylized. Nobody pretends that the tree is a real tree or the sunset is a real sunset, So in the language, when it's stylized, it's proper. Acting is a little exaggerated and stylized, and it's proper. Film is a photography. In photography, everything is real. Anything stylized would feel, fake.
What we ended up doing was spending 4 months together in his house in Connecticut, Monday to Friday. We were locked into what we came finally to regard as our prison. And then we would go back to New York on the Friday and instantly separate, not exchange a word, for a blissful Saturday and blissful Sunday till the evening when he would come here to my flat to collect me and drive me back to prison for the next almost unendurable 5 days when we slowly hammered out the whole script, moment by moment.
They had some bumps in the road along the way. I spoke to both of them at different times, and both used terms that you don't use in mixed company about each other.
Well, no, we had a big conflict, because I hated his cooking and he hated my cooking.
I regarded ourselves, both of us, as the odd couple.
On the other hand, we had an enormous advantage to have the music before. So that we, for example, every day we spent like a couple of hours, just listening to the music, to Mozart's music, and then picking up pieces which would fit here or would fit there. And that humbled Peter Shaffer. The music humbled Peter Shaffer. Suddenly, you start to play music and you start to say the lines, and Peter himself was saying, no, stop talking, stop talking.
I said to Milos that I did not want repetitions. I did not want the Mozart theme. I did not want one piece of music. That it was not in the background, cueing the emotion we should feel, but it was in fact the foreground.
Peter Shaffer one day said, listen, the music is becoming the third character of this film.
I think possibly the first film that has music as its leading character.
We met in the airport in New York to discuss it, Peter, Milos, and Saul-Zaentz. And they proposed this as a project. I mean, I had less than an hour to think about it because I was moving on to catch another plane from another airport. And immediately, apart from being slightly flattered that they thought of me, I thought of it as a project which, so long as it didn't develop into a sort of Hollywood scenario, I would be very interested in.
And he said, I would, under one condition, that no one note of Mozart will be changed. You have our word.
We had no idea what the film was going to look like. Although I knew the play, I'd seen the play, I knew that once Milos got his hands on it, that it would be a completely different animal.
We are rolling, stand by, speed.
And action anytime, please. Yeah, let's start again. Let's give me some water because...
All right,
it's fine. It's perfect. Casting is enormously important because that's finally whom the audience sees. My ideas or writer's ideas means nothing if what I see on the screen I don't believe. It was interesting situation because a lot of big names wanted to play, especially Salieri and Mozart, right? And I somehow felt that I don't want to see known faces. I want people to see Mozart and Salieri. Both Saul and Peter, agreed, no, we don't need stars. We don't need big names. We have Mozart and his music, and we believe in the movie. Mozart was tough to cast.
This man had written his first concerto at the age of 4. His first symphony at 7. A full-scale opera at 12. Did it show? Which one of them could he be?
When you look at the portraits of Mozart from the time, you will know this interesting thing. None looks like the other. He must have been very nondescript face, that you wouldn't notice him in the crowd at all. So he couldn't be a leading man type, leading hero type. On the other hand, he has to be a wonderful actor, and he has to master the music.
He was very hard on me, and he was quite gentle with the others. And then in the process, I learned. On one day, I spent maybe 6 to 8 hours in a screen test. Every 20 minutes, other actors came in, and I just played opposite them all day long. And so I got to watch Milos working.
Okay?
Every 20 minutes with a different actor or different set of actors.
Very good. No, that's fine. That's fine. It doesn't matter. Fine. You still have...
Oh, I walked out.
That's all right.
And then I began to understand that the people who I was assuming he was most interested in, because it was clear from their work, he was also treating the same way as he treated me. And the people who you felt that wasn't going to be the right combination.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Those are the people that there was a much more gentler relationship with.
I think we auditioned over 1,000 people for all the parts.
I think the number we had at one time was 1263, and we weren't finished. I know someone ran a tally about we were not finished. I'm sure we passed close to 1,400.
It seemed like I was auditioning for a year. In retrospect, what we were really doing was rehearsing. I wasn't actually auditioning anymore. I guess I was rehearsing. I thought I was still working to get the part. But, in that time, I thought, this is a wonderful project, and he's a great director, and I'm really, really lucky to be still here.
Of course, you start with the main characters, and then you go down, but down doesn't mean less important. I think that the small, parts, bit parts are as important as the main characters. In certain way, I am paying even more attention to casting the small bit parts, because they have to be, once you see them, you will never forget them. Because nothing drives me more crazy when I'm watching a film and somebody appears, and then disappears for 20 minutes and then reappears, and he looks like the guy who was just there, and I'm, who is he? Who is she?
Milos called me and said, Winnie, I would like very much for you to be in my movie Amadeus. It is not a very big part, but I would love you very much to be in it.
One day, I was reading F. Murray Abraham for a small part in the movie, and he was all right. And then I had a young actor coming for reading for Mozart, and I asked F. Murray, listen, would you just help me here? This is just, to help and read Salieri to this young man. And F. Murray, probably because, that's, now it doesn't matter, gave a wonderful performance.
I did one of the things from Salieri, and then I stopped and said to him, Milos, this is where he becomes the old man in the script, which I hadn't really worked on. And he said, well, do the old man. And I just did the old man. I didn't think for sure I wasn't going to get this thing, but I still acted my heart out,
He read so beautifully that it started to bug me,
A couple of days later, he called and he said, I want you to know that you're my first choice. And I've been around for a while, and I said, well, that's nice. I'm very happy about it. But what does that mean? You see, he wasn't saying, you've got the part, or I really want you to do it, and there's no question about it. And he said, you're my first choice. Now, from my point of view, that doesn't pay the rent. I'm very flattered. And I said, thank you, Milos. Just tell me what I have to do next, because I'm busy right now painting my kitchen. Some time went by, and then he said, he wants to see you for this improv group again. It's different people. I said, no, I'm telling you, I'm not going to do it.
Milos said, that's the kind of guy who would be Salieri. And I said, why do you say that? He said, well, he thinks he's not going to be happy about what I say now, Milos or Murray. He says, this kind of guy thinks he would be a great actor if he didn't have breaks against him. Also, I think he's Salieri off stage as well as on stage, And he was right.
So after several weeks, I told F. Murray Abraham, okay, you'll get the part. He obviously didn't believe me because he immediately accepted a role in another film.
While I was on the set of Scarface, I got the word that I was going to do Amadeus. And everyone's attitude, the stars on the show, changed toward me immediately. I was no longer just this hardworking good actor named F. Murray Abraham like so many other hardworking good actors. I was the man who got the part that every actor in the English language was trying to get. And I was really scared, just scared, because I had talked the talk, and now I had to walk the walk. And for 3 days I couldn't answer the phone. I was just sucking it up, getting ready for the mountain.
This film could have been shot only in three cities, Vienna, Budapest, or Prague, because only these three cities have the same style of 18th century architecture. Prague was ideal. Prague was absolutely ideal because thanks to communist inefficiency, the 18th century was untouched.
Prague was an amazing time capsule. You could set up a camera just about everywhere without having to undo a lot of signs of the 20th century. They just weren't there.
There was no advertising. There was no... I mean, basically, you removed the electric streetlights. You were in the 18th century.
A lot of the locations, all you had to do was throw some dirt down, put a couple lanterns with some oil in it, and you were ready to go.
You have squares and streets. You can turn the camera 360 degrees around, and you don't have to change anything.
It's an exquisitely beautiful city. I don't think there is any other city in Europe that has such an extensive, uninterrupted core of 18th century structures.
For me, it was a very mixed, emotional experience because I was not allowed to go back. I was a traitor, an immigrant. So when I went there for the first time, which was more or less to, negotiate the making of the movie, that was very emotional for me because, before I didn't hope that I will ever see, my native country and places where I kissed my first girlfriend, ever again in my life. And then I was coming back to Prague for the shooting. I remember I was arriving January 2nd, it was very cold, snow everywhere. And I realized that, from now on, I have to cut myself emotionally from my past entirely because otherwise, the work would suffer.
When I got to Prague, in the beginning, as you remember, of Amadeus, there's the scene where his assistant coming with the muffins and Vincent Schiavelli and snow. And so I had written like a 13-page snow alert in English and on the back in Czech. I wanted trucks rigged, I wanted lighting packages, I wanted duplicate equipment, I wanted road maps. They got this thing and they said, what are you talking about? Half the people don't have phones. We don't have trucks that we can let sit in the sidelines. So I said, very simple, just tell me when it's going to snow.
We didn't have still the weather reports as perfect as we have today. So, there might be snow, so there was always a snow alert.
They phoned at one point and said, there's no snow. It's not going to snow this year. The long-term weather report says we're not going to have any snow. We're not going to shoot you until the end of March. We're going to shoot with fake snow. I said, okay. So you're free. You can take other work.
Every day we had to prepare 2 sets. One for in case there is overnight snowfall, and one in case there is not, And but that was not my problem. That was not my problem. I didn't want even to know about it.
I was engaged to do an episode of Taxi on Monday, and Saul called on Thursday, the Thursday before, and said, it's snowing. Can you come now? I said, yeah. He said, I know, you got to be back in LA. We'll get you back on Monday. So I said, sure. He said, we'll just do the one exterior shot in the snow, and then you'll come back in a couple of weeks and we'll do the interiors. I said, okay. So I got on a plane Thursday night, and I got to Prague Friday night, and we shot Saturday night, and I was back for Monday. I had never been to a Soviet bloc country before, and going to one at such a fantastically accelerated rate of speed my first impressions were enormous and huge. I felt like I was in a B-rate, you know, a grade B spy movie. Followed everywhere. Hotel rooms bugged.
There were sizable rooms in this one hotel, and they all were very ornate, with a chandelier and these sconces and rugs, kind of worn, chipped, and tacky, but the fact is that they were there, you know? And this one guy, Frank, he said, these guys have got this room bugged. I said, who cares? Let them listen. He says, no, man, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to listen. I'm going to let them listen to me. I'm going to knock that. I think, oh, what are you going to make a problem? No, listen, I want to show you. So he starts climbing around. The sconces, no. Looks at it's the chandelier. He looks at he gets up on a chair. He's climbing around. No, it's not here. And I said, let it go. Let's go to dinner. No, I want to find it. He said, he rolls the rug back, and he finds a plate about this big with 2 screws in it. He said, I told you, man. It's right here. He gets a butter knife. We had little kitchenettes, right? He gets a butter knife. He takes it out, takes the final screw out, and as he takes the last screw out, there's this tremendous crash, and the chandelier beneath us crashes down in the apartment below us. We went to dinner in it like a shot.
A friend of mine, an older Czech director named Jiří Weiss, gave me some pineapples and lemons for his daughter. And we met. She came to the set that Saturday night, and I had the lemons and the oranges, or the oranges and the pineapples and the lemons. And I gave her this stuff. And half the crew was secret police, and everybody knew it. And afterwards, I don't remember his name, but he was sort of smarmy cop, obviously cop. He said, so tell me, so what is this woman you meet, this intrigue in Prague? What is this? And I played like idiot. And I said, oh, she's the daughter of a roommate of a friend of mine who's from here, used to make movies here. Anyway, he asked me if I would bring his daughter some pineapples and some lemons. And he said, pineapple? And I had learned the Czech word for pineapple. It's ananas. It's the same word as in French. I said, yes, ananas. And he said, yes, in the can. I said, no, real, fresh ananas. He said, fresh pineapple? Fresh ananas? And then for the next 20 minutes, I watch it go around the set. And they're all doing the same gesture at the end of the exchange. They're going, in the can. And the teller of the story says, no, fresh ananas. And they all kind of, and looked at me and kind of, I think they were the only 2 pineapples in Prague that January.
When they go down the corridor of the insane asylum, that was a war museum.
The central hall where all the mad people were kept was part of a military hospital for the wounded from the 30 Years' War.
It was a funny situation because when communists took it over, they left only the ground floor as a kind of a museum, but was closed for the public. And up in the 2nd and 3rd floor were a secret archive of the secret police. Well, that was a panic when, they learned that they showed us the ground floor corridors.
We were questioned very closely as to what our connections were. We could be, after all, we could be CIA members or we could be whatever. And they didn't much like the idea of us, a film company, invading the military archive. But we managed to persuade them.
When we went there for the first time, that corridor had 75 2-ton cannons all looking at each other. And Milos says, I love it. I said, yeah, I love it too. What are we going to do with these 2,000-pound cannons? Oh, he says, the cannons can't be there. Oh, I said, well, I figured that out already, that the cannons can't be there. But, you know what? We're going to have to get all of these cannons out and you want the pristine snow. No snow can have anybody's footprints on it, and then we got to get these cannons out.
Well, I didn't know it's a problem, you know. So there are some cannons there. Oh, take them away. You know, I didn't know that every cannon weighs several tons, you know. They have to hire the whole army to take it out.
The first 3 weeks of shooting was Salieri in the hospital room. I was the guy that went out with him in the morning, and Dick Smith, who was our makeup artist, at 4 o'clock in the morning, every morning, for 4 hours of makeup before the crew came. And you go out to Barrendorf, you know, no one is there at 4 o'clock in the morning, and the minute you get there, where's my tea, you know? Well, you know, I just got out of the car, Murray, you know, I'm going to go get your tea.
Dick Smith is the best makeup man in the world, and when we would start working in the morning, it was 4 o'clock. I would get up, I'd get to the studio by 4:30. We'd work on the makeup for 4.5 hours. As much preparation as I had made for the old man, the voice, the gestures, and so on, the fact is that after sitting for 4.5 hours, at that hour in the morning, you are kind of tired and slow, and your movements are kind of like this. This kind of thing starts to happen. And I also had lenses in my eyes, which every once in a while had to be removed, and my eyes had to be sprayed with stuff so that the pain, which was always there when I was working, would not be too much. Once I looked into a mirror at my face, I felt like it was completely convincing. All I had to do was believe this guy, and it was not hard. I'm not denigrating my work. I'm a very proud actor. But with a man like Dick Smith there, and with the words of Peter Schaffer, which are, they've got to be the most beautiful descriptions of music ever written, whether on film or in literature.
This was a music I'd never heard.
And the fact that we can hear the music accompanying the words.
Filled with such longing, such unfulfillable longing.
Well, what more can you ask for?
It seemed to me that I was hearing the voice of God. Excuse me.
Because of the way the schedule went, the first thing that was filmed in the shooting schedule was all of Salieri Old. That sort of breathtaking section of Murray's performance, most breathtaking, was all done in the first couple of weeks. But it gave us the time to work on our own. We rehearsed a lot on our own. We rehearsed all of the scenes before the filming began. Initially, Meg Tilly was playing Constanza in the film, and she was amazing. Basically, at one point, Milos had said he felt like we had done it, do you know, because the work was going so well up to that point. And the day before Meg was to appear on camera for the first time, she got hurt in a soccer game.
She's playing soccer with some kids in the street, and she torn the ligament in her leg so badly that the doctors told us that we would have to wait like 5 weeks before she could start, and that we couldn't because it was all independent money which Sol put together, and we just couldn't afford it.
It was shocking, I think partially because we were where we were, behind the Iron Curtain in its way, cut off in a way from our lives to a significant degree, more than if we had been shooting in Western Europe or someplace closer to home. Suddenly she was just gone and in a hospital. So in a very short amount of time, they had to find the actress who would take over the part.
The casting director who was brought on to hire the new Constanza, this woman called an acting teacher of mine and said, do you have anybody you can recommend for the part? And he said, Elizabeth Berridge. And she said, oh no, she's too weird and introverted and she's too quirky for this outgoing, bubbly girl, which I was.
We flew to New York for a weekend, and it was extraordinary.
Friday night, we went Prague, Paris, And Saturday morning, we took the Concorde to New York. So we got there, went to Milos's apartment, and they had 60 some odd girls lined up for us to see.
I saw like 60 girls. Sunday, I read like 12 of them. Out of these 12, 2 were I couldn't decide in between them, so Sol decided, let's bring them to Prague and let's do a screen test with them in Prague.
It felt like calamitous to me. It felt like it had gone so badly, and I remember saying to my father, if I can't even speak, how am I going to get a part acting ever? Because speaking is required in that line of work. And then I got a call saying, you're flying to Czechoslovakia for a test, a screen test, and there's you and another contender. And so I had no passport, and this was, I think, the next day.
Milos went back to Prague Sunday so he could shoot on Monday. And I went over there on Monday, went back with the 2 girls on Monday. And that was some ushering job with 2 girls who were up for the same part, being with him. I kept saying, I love you both, I love you both.
We were flown over and we tested. And they had us all, they did the hair and the makeup. And meanwhile, they're filming the movie. And it's all like you really want to not start to feel like you're part of the thing. And because, in my case, I knew I was getting back on a plane the next day. And apparently, they couldn't decide that first day. So they said, well, there's going to be another test tomorrow. So we came back and went through all the do's and the gowns, and this went on for a week. And the other woman and I hung out every night and would have dinner, and I was always a nervous wreck, and she would say, no, I'm sure you look lovely, and that wig they had you when I was a girl, I'm sure you did great. And I was preparing to okay, how do I say thank you for having me and for considering me and for this nice trip, first class ticket to Prague. Thank you so much, and bye. And good luck with your movie. And and Milos said, essentially, you both have the part. It's impossible to decide between you. So I had to go with the fact that one of you is simply too pretty to play Constanza. So Elizabeth, you have the part. And and I was like, thanks. Well, I have the part. That's good.
As much as I love McTilly, I think as a personality, Elizabeth Berich was more right, because Constanza was a landlady's daughter. She was a street kid,
So I got the booby prize and had to stay and had packed clothes probably for 3 days, and there I was for 6 months in Prague and started work the next day. And that was it. I was Constanza.
Frau Mozart?
I remember the first day, the first scene that I shot was the Nipples of Venus scene where I come to see Salieri, and I had to eat like about 1.5 million of those.
Go on, try one. They're quite surprising.
And marzipan is foul. I don't know, it's just an awful. And I remember getting ill, and Milos was like, it's her job. But wasn't exactly having to work in a coal mine, but eating 1 million marzipan balls can... Maybe I didn't know I didn't have to eat the whole thing. That was another thing that 20 years old, I didn't know, you can spit it out at the end of... I don't know. Oh, we're going again, okay. And it's funny how that can be the only thing that's on your mind, and I couldn't. I had to... It's like, oh...
You're wonderful.
The first scene that I actually did in the actual making of the movie was the March of Welcome.
Very good.
Meeting Mozart for the first time.
Very good, Majesty.
I had to learn to play the piano not only accurately but badly. Even though the harpsichord, the piano was unhooked, you just, in case you were seeing the hands, it had to be in the right place.
Lightly, then strongly.
They had provided me with several different versions of pre-recorded music, and I had to learn to do it as recorded, which was fun, actually. I had a good time, and I got to be very good at it. Tom worked on it, too. Tom had a piano in his room, and he worked on it all the time.
The keyboards that I played on in front of the camera were all silent. All of the music was recorded before we started, so the sequence was either done with the music being played out loud in the room or in my ear if there was dialogue that had to go on. In the scene where Mozart first meets the emperor and Salieri has written this march, it was such a surreal experience because the scene was staged so the actors were behind me. The keyboard is here. Because there's dialogue, the only music is being played in a tiny little transistor in my ear. The keyboard is silent. I'm looking away so that if, when you lose your bearings, you can't find it because you can't hear anything. So it truly was a kind of schizophrenic situation.
When we met, the only instrument he ever played was guitar. He never played piano. But he was spending like 3-4 hours a day for several months practicing the pieces, just the pieces which he had to play.
I began, as the months went on, to actually believe the illusion a little bit. So it was always very distressing to go to my practice room and hear what I really sounded like on a sounded keyboard. The practice room where I had my piano, oddly enough, was right over the room where Milos hung out. Imagine what a nightmare that must have been for him. The one day he made a comment about that I was improving was the day that my teacher was demonstrating to me.
Neville Mariner, after seeing the film, said he never hits a wrong key, even when he plays backwards.
Now you're playing backwards!
There was just no way to be able to do that without being able to do it. It's one thing to play on a silent keyboard to a playback, but it's something entirely different to do it upside down behind your back. In the way of stunt work, you learn what the assignment is, and a chemical gets released, and you actually can do it.
It was a big thrill for everybody to realize that we were going to film in practically the only wooden opera house left in Central Europe, and also most perfectly preserved. It had undergone many alterations, but they were of a minor nature, and architecturally the place was intact.
When we first time arrived to Prague for location, and they showed us the theater, we were there, with Peter Shaffer and Saul, when suddenly I realized, well, Peter Shaffer disappeared. Where is Peter Shaffer? We found him in the corridor, hidden, crying. Because he learned that he is standing exactly at the place where Mozart himself in person conducted the world premiere of Don Giovanni.
I tell you, we felt awed the first time we stepped on that stage and realized that our hero had been in that very spot.
I think this fact, gave a lot of humility and respect for that place to every actor and every dancer and everybody there.
There's something that happens when you do that, I promise you, when you do it in the place, in the atmosphere. I'm not crazy about, spiritual, ghosts and things. But I don't deny them. And suddenly, the reality of the place and the thing and the moment really enters into you, which is why it was a great idea to do it there instead of trying to build the set. It was brilliant.
But, again, thanks to the neglect, during the communist era, it was a powder keg.
It was in danger of burning down at any moment. And it still had gas lines in it. They lit it with gas. They used to have limelight in it. It really hadn't been modernized.
Now we are going there to light, millions of candles.
All those candles in a wooden opera house in a wooden dome. When the chandeliers were lit, I remember holding my breath for what seemed like 4 days.
And there we were, all these extras, all these wigs and all this flammable stuff in this tinderbox dry theater where Don Giovanni had its premiere. That theater we were in. Amazing.
Imagine the trust of the opera house allowing us to be there.
We had every day like 30 or 40 firemen everywhere standing there. But they were I will never forget Don Giovanni. At certain moment, Don Giovanni moves to the table, does this, and he has a head with huge plumage, feather, like a peacock feather, right? And leans like that and talks to the Commodore. We rehearsed. Everything was fine. Okay, let's shoot. So light the candles. We didn't realize that there on the table is a small candelabra, which now is lit. Okay, camera, roll it, playback, we are shooting. And the actor, he is performing like that. He leans, and suddenly we see that this feather caught fire. And the fire is going up and up and up. But he is in the ecstasy of performing. He doesn't even notice, And everybody is staring and nobody, and we have like 40, 50 firemen around there. And his head starts, be really on flames. Finally, one fireman dared to lean from the wings and said, excuse me, Mr. Forman, would you please stop the cameras? Your actor is on fire. It was sacred. Camera is rolling, everything is sacred,
I was under the impression at that time, never having done a movie of that size, I had done a horror film, and that if things went wrong, and that one should just stop. When we did that scene where we're playing under the table, I don't remember if it was an actual take or a rehearsal, but I came right out of my dress. And, which I was barely in to begin with. And, and there was Milos. Keep going. I was like, really?
Stop it! I am. Stop it!
And Milos looks for he would love life coming in accidentally.
There. You see?
Milos can be a bit abrupt. That's kind of a pleasant way to put it. But he's never wrong. On Amadeus, after this incredible journey to get to Prague through the night and all of this remarkable stuff, I'm suddenly standing in 18th century costume in the snow in Prague in the middle of the night. And then I have to walk around a corner and walk down the street. And he says to me, Winnie, television is ruining you. He meant my performance was terrible. My walk was terrible. Television is ruining you. And then we did a second take a moment later, and he said, that was wonderful. I don't know what changed.
We were 6 days or 5 days into shooting the first scene that I was in, and Milos wasn't really saying anything. And I was starting to feel a little bit more comfortable, and I said, Milos, do you have any suggestions? And he said, no. I said, well, is it okay? Should I do more or less? Or he said, no, you're doing fine. And I said, oh, because you just haven't said anything. I said, well, if there was anything wrong, I would have said so. It was like, I was doing fine, so he didn't need to say anything.
Less you talk, less you confuse actors' heads. If you cast wrong, then you have to work, and usually you're in trouble anyway. Director is a little bit of everything, but good director always, for every part of his work, must choose people who are better than him. for me, the operas were not difficult at all, because it was, first of all, beautifully recorded, you know, beautifully cast by Twyla, and she did all the choreography, you know. So for me, it was just a question, you know, where to place the camera and how to shoot it.
It was extremely difficult to work in Prague. There were no materials. Everything had to be brought in, and everything was improvised.
A sweet hot
They had no properties, they had no wardrobes, they had no fabrics, they had nothing to build with, but they had an ingenuity, and they had a humor, and they had a force to their imagination that more than repaid the lack of materials.
I really enjoyed, and I had a great fun when we were shooting the parody of in Schikaneder's theater, the parody of Mozart's operas.
Milos only talks about doing things extremely and broadly. That is one of his charms. You cannot go over the top with Milos. It's not possible. It doesn't exist. I like that.
Peter enjoyed very much writing this scene, you know, and the parody words, new lyrics.
I'd never done anything like that before. I'm not sure Milos had ever directed anything like that before. And I'm sure Twyla had never choreographed anything like that before.
Sheriff! I'm sick to death of that tune!
That was a pure joy, you know, we just put every silly thing in, you know, the dwarves.
It's very inventive scene, it's very Milos Forman scene. You feel it in the man. The thing that gives him the greatest pleasure is that kind of theater.
The guy who is in the back of the horse, right? Because he has to reach out and give out dove. And when the horse moved, he had to walk backwards. I'll tell you, that was probably the most difficult thing in the film.
There were so many extras. We were hard-pressed for enough wigs and enough costumes.
Makeup and hair and wardrobe for 500 people. It was like a, it was like a battleground.
Once these hundreds of people were dressed, they were sort of on their own, and they wandered the halls and ate their lunch and made phone calls, and all in their clothes. I think that had a tremendous amount to do with the way they came across. It was life. They lived in these clothes for as long as it took to complete the scene, just as they did in the 18th century. And I think there is a great deal of authentic life in them and in the clothes. They were in the clothes long enough that they were not a costume. They were their own.
Ten jistý úspěch, který třeba ty kostýmy dosáhly jenom proto, že jsem...
I think the costumes in the film succeeded because I had a hard head. When I didn't like something, I had it redone again and again until it was right.
Nemůžu říct 100%, pak 100% to nejde nikdy. Předělávám třeba ten kostým tak dlouho.
I didn't allow even the producer to interfere with me when it was costing more money. I'd redo it until I'd say, that can go in front of a camera. The worst thing is to compromise, because it compromises the entire production.
Dělat kompromisy a hlavně kompromisy s produkcí.
It's every woman's fantasy, I think, for about 5 minutes to wear something like that and feel like a princess and then it gets old. It's very uncomfortable, and you're like, it was literally like being squeezed and coming out at the top like toothpaste.
18th century costumes, it really informs how you stand, how you walk, what your posture should be. 18th century clothes have very, very tight shoulders. They keep you back. Keep your shoulders back and keep your head erect. That's the pose. That was the look of the time, and that's what the clothes tell you they want you to do.
The thing that surprised me that happened was that because my hair had gotten dyed a kind of gold color, I would get up in the morning, and just the image of that was so different to me that it actually triggered the part of me that was more extroverted. As people would show up for their various sequences in the film, I found that I had an urge to, take them out and to be the kind of social director and in a way that isn't my natural inclination.
He was so much in the head of Mozart. After the movie was wrapped, we ended up sharing a living space together, and he was a very different man than he was. He was transformed into Mozart.
I hadn't thought about this in a long time. But as Salieri, I was separate from the rest of the cast for the first 3.5 weeks because I was only doing the old man. And I had decided to be separate from the cast because that's the kind of man Salieri was. I'm not that way. I love parties. I love a good time. I really do. Good jokes. But I was extremely solitary. It was me against everyone else. What I didn't realize was that this was infecting the way the other cast members felt about me. There began to be a separation. Whenever there were parties, I wasn't invited because I, first of all, wasn't there. I was in another hotel. But also, I was always too busy. So if you refuse for 3.5, 4 weeks, people don't invite you anymore, as you can well imagine. So what happened was I began to be like that character. I didn't like the idea of being separate, but in a way that really contributed a great deal to the success of the performance.
In some way, I feel like the working relationship that I had with Murray was supported by the fact that we didn't become such close friends that we knew too much about each other.
Tom and I have great respect for each other. We like each other. But during the film, we did not... We were living a little bit like those two characters.
There was always that element where we never knew each other so well as people that we could tell exactly when the other one was telling the truth or not.
It happens. When you embody a character, as we did, it happens that you carry it over.
He said to give you this.
It sounds crazy a little bit, but it's true of any actor who does a part for a length of time. And of course, these parts meant so much to both of us. It was only right that we had this slight antagonism.
It's too soon. Can I? Could I help you?
Would you?
The dictation of the Requiem by the dying Mozart seems to me to overturn every piece of wisdom I was ever told. The words are in themselves not particularly interesting. They don't even look as if they're a movie script. They look as if they are, they will never play. They're sort of dull, C sharp, E flat, bar 14, this, that, the other. It's several pages of musical direction. One, the guy's in bed and the other is writing at the end. And nobody moves.
It's a very daring thing to do, to have a whole sequence where composers are dictating music to each other. And they had set us up before we started filming with Neville Marriner and his assistant, and they had them do the scene for us to give us an idea of what real musicians would be like. And forgive me, Neville, it was awful. It was awful because, they're not actors.
Any film school would tell you this is not movie.
Come, let's begin.
We ended in F major.
Yes?
So, now, A minor.
There's one sequence early on in the scene where Mozart is fairly delirious and trying to find the phrase that he's looking for in the dictation.
A minor.
Yes. Confutatis. A minor.
In reality, what happened on that day is there's a little John Strauss is sitting in the corner pressing the buttons on a little cassette player. We have little hearing aids in our ears which are playing in a kind of AM radio way the musical phrase so that we can be on the tempo and on the pitch that when all the music gets laid in afterwards that it's there. And there was some mishap, so there's a moment where I'm me, the actor, I'm genuinely lost. But because of the kind of trust and connection that we have, the whole sequence is in the film.
A minor.
Start with the voices. Basses first. Second beat of the first
Time?
Common time. Second beat of the first measure.
There were 2 cameras set up so that we didn't have to worry about overlapping. And it was as though we were in a theater. And most of that is improvisational because he was very acting as though he were very sick at the time. And consequently, he began to lose certain things. And I would guide him, actually, at times. He would get lost and I would help him. It was a real symphony between the 2 of us, a real duet.
Later on in the scene, I don't know that I ever talked to Murray about this, but I would skip information.
First bassoon, tenor trombones, with the tenors.
I would leave out information that I knew he needed to go to the next place.
You go too fast.
Do you have it?
You go too fast.
Do you have it?
First bassoon, tenor trombone, what?
With the tenors.
So he'd have to stop me, and that Salieri would seem like he just wasn't quite smart enough.
Now, trumpets and timpani, trumpets in D.
No.
Listen to me.
I don't understand.
Listen.
So that kind of playing that you can do because there were cameras on both of us and also because of a superb partnership between 2 players. The thing that most amazed me was the artistry of every person in every job that worked on this film. And the extraordinary storytelling that happened from every point of view.
I have the deepest gratitude to that crew because they gave everything they had.
In most cases, the film would be a biography of Mozart, and it would be what happened and what happened. But to take all the circumstances of that extraordinary life and put it in the context of this other man and his argument with his God is genius, I think.
I don't really care what is it about because it moves me and makes me think. It makes me laugh. It makes me cry a little. And whatever you think about, that's what it's about.
I don't see that the movie has aged. It seems it's a timeless story, and it's beautifully told, and it's beautifully shot.
I'm sure you'll hear this again and again. But we were part and parcel of something that was greater than we were.
I remember the stunned silence of those long main titles at the end of the film while the piano concerto is still playing. And the extraordinary thing, but people waited until the end of the main titles. And then the extraordinary applause at the end, just as if they'd been to a concert. And then you got the first sense that perhaps this was going to be an unusual movie, and that perhaps the music had won.
The thing that pleases me almost more than anything else about the whole enterprise is the number of people, young people, who discover the man I think is the greatest composer in the world.
So many people were introduced to Mozart as a composer compared with what would have happened if we'd just done it in concert halls. It would have taken us 100 years to reach as many people as the film reached.